The king who listened to footsteps. The castle of Noxmere rose above the pines like a held breath. Its towers were not screaming for attention, just watching, quiet, patient, and heavy with years. A wind moved through the dead leaves like soft applause, and somewhere far below the stone bridge, a river murmured as if it knew secrets it refused to repeat. King Valen stood at the highest window, hands folded behind his back, wearing a dark coat that looked too simple for a king. No crown, no jewels, no show. Only a silver ring on his finger, dull with age, and eyes that carried the kind of tired you get when you've lived too long and still haven't forgiven yourself for it. He could hear everything. That was his curse and his gift. The deer shifting in the forest, the bats scraping the air, the anxious heartbeat of the night guards pretending not to be afraid. Even the distant village, small lights in the valley, had a rhythm of life he could feel through stone and wind, like a song he wasn't sure he deserved to hear. Behind him, his advisor, Lord Marius, cleared his throat with careful politeness. "Your Majesty, the council waits." Valen didn't turn. They always wait. Let them learn patience. It's good for the soul. Marius hesitated. The villagers are blaming us again. A broken wagon, missing hens, strange shadows near the wheat fields. They fear what they don't understand. Valen finally looked over his shoulder, expression calm but strained at the edges. "And do you know what I fear, Marius?" Marius swallowed. "No, Your Majesty." Valen's voice softened into something almost human. "That one day they will be right." Marius didn't know how to answer that. He never did. He was loyal, but loyalty is easy when it isn't asked to hold your darkest truth. A knock came at the door, fast and uneven, like the person on the other side was trying to be brave but didn't fully know how. Before any guard could announce themselves, the door creaked open, and a young servant stumbled in with a candle that shook in his hand. "Your Majesty," the boy blurted, cheeks flushed from running. There's a girl at the gate." Marius frowned. "At this hour?" The boy nodded quickly. "She says she has a message for the king. She says she's not afraid." Valen's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in surprise. "No one says that unless they are lying or desperate." Marius leaned closer. "It could be a trap." Valen gave a small, tired smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Everything is a trap if you've lived long enough." He walked down the corridor with measured steps, his boots making no sound on the old stone. The castle torches flickered as he passed, as if they recognized him. Along the way, 2 guards stiffened and bowed, but their hearts raced in a way Valen could hear too clearly. He wished he couldn't. At the main gate, the iron bars were half-drawn. Cold air rushed in, carrying pine and wet soil and something else, something alive and warm. A girl stood outside under a thin cloak, drenched from fog and mist. Not a child, not quite a woman, maybe 19 or 20. Her hair clung to her face in dark strands, and her hands were red from the cold, but her posture was steady, like she'd practiced standing tall in a world that tried to bend her. And she was holding something strange. A small wooden box tied with a faded ribbon, the kind people use for letters they want to keep safe, or for memories they can't bear to hold. Valen studied her quietly. He didn't rush. He didn't threaten. He didn't perform. "What is your name?" he asked. Her chin lifted, and her voice came out clear even while her knees trembled. "Elara." Marius stepped forward. "State your purpose and be brief." Elara looked past Marius, straight into Valen's eyes, as if she could see the man buried under the monster everyone imagined. "I came for you, King Valen, not for your castle, not for your gold, for you." The guards exchanged glances, confused and uneasy. People didn't speak to him like that. They begged or cursed. They did not choose him. Valen's expression didn't change, but something inside him tightened. Like a door he'd nailed shut a century ago had just been knocked on from the inside. "You're either very brave," he said, "or very foolish." Elara's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "I've been told I'm both. Depends who's losing the argument." Even Marius couldn't stop the smallest snort of laughter, which he quickly disguised as a cough. The tension cracked for half a second, letting in a sliver of warmth. Valen felt it, and hated how much he needed it. He nodded toward the box. "What is that?" Elara hugged it closer. "A promise." "A promise from whom?" Her eyes shimmered, and for the first time her voice shook. "From my mother before she died." The words didn't land like drama. They landed like stone. Valen's gaze softened against his will. "Why bring it to me?" Elara took a careful step forward until the gate bars were only inches between them. "Because she told me the truth about you." Marius stiffened. There is no truth about him that would send a village girl here at midnight. Elara's attention never left Valen. "She said the vampire king once saved her life." The guards went still. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if the night itself was listening. Valen's jaw tightened. The memory rose so fast it made his chest feel hollow. A storm years ago, a frightened woman in the forest, a choice he'd made when no one was watching, kindness he'd buried because it was safer to be feared than loved. He hadn't expected the world to remember. He hadn't expected anyone to come looking for the part of him he tried to starve. Valen spoke gently, though every word cost him. "If your mother told you that, she gave you dangerous hope." Elara swallowed. "Hope is all I have left." She lifted the wooden box through the bars, hands shaking. "She said if I ever felt my life turning dark, I should bring this to you. She said you would understand what it means to fight yourself." Valen stared at the ribbon. It was faded, frayed at the edges, tied in a simple knot. Human hands, human time, human patience. He did not reach for it. Not because he didn't want to. Because he wanted to too much. Marius whispered, "My king, do not touch it. We don't know what's inside." Valen didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on Elara's face, on the stubborn bravery that looked painfully familiar. Her heartbeat was fast but steady, like someone terrified, yet refusing to run. And then Elara said the one thing that made the air feel suddenly thin. "She also told me your real name," Elara murmured, voice low as prayer. "The name you had before you became the King of Shadows." Valen's breath stopped. No one spoke that name anymore, not even him. His gaze sharpened, not with anger but with something closer to grief. "Who else knows it?" Elara's lips parted, and tears finally gathered, shining in the torchlight. "Someone who wants you destroyed, and they're coming. I ran ahead, but I don't think I'm the only one at your gate tonight." A soft sound echoed beyond the fog, barely more than a scrape, the faintest crunch of gravel. Not an animal, not the wind. Footsteps. Valen turned his head slowly toward the darkness outside the gate, listening as the night arranged itself into a warning. His senses caught a second rhythm beneath Elara's frightened heart, another presence, hidden, patient, and far too calm. Marius reached for his sword, voice tight. "Guards!" Valen lifted one hand, stopping him. His expression became something rare, focused, protective, quietly furious. He looked back at Elara, and for the first time his voice carried a tenderness he did not allow anyone to hear. "Stay behind me," he said. Elara blinked, stunned. "You're going to protect me." Valen's eyes flicked to the fog again, where the footsteps had just stopped, as if whoever stood there was smiling. "I don't know why you came," Valen said softly, "but you should not have come alone." He reached for the wooden box at last, slowly, carefully, like touching it might wake a sleeping part of him that he couldn't put back. The ribbon brushed his fingers. And the moment he touched it, the torches along the wall guttered all at once, as if the castle itself had inhaled sharply. From the fog, a voice called out, polite, amused, and far too familiar to Valen's ears. "My king," the voice said, "I've brought you a gift and an ending." Valen's hand tightened around the box as Elara's breath caught in her throat. Because Valen recognized that voice. And he hadn't heard it since the night he swore he would never feel human again. The gift that wasn't a gift. "My king," the voice repeated, smooth as silk over stone. "You always did love a dramatic entrance." Valen didn't move. His posture stayed calm, but inside him, something old and sharp woke up, an instinct that had kept him alive for centuries. He angled his body slightly so Elara was behind his shoulder, shielded without being shoved, protected without being treated like she was helpless. Marius stepped forward anyway, unable to help himself. "Show yourself." A figure emerged from the fog as if he'd been walking slowly for an hour, savoring every step. He wore a traveling coat that looked expensive but dusty, and his hair was tied back with careless elegance. His face was handsome in a way that felt practiced, like a mask that had learned how to charm people into lowering their guard. But his eyes were the problem. They didn't look at the torches or the guards. They looked at Valen as if Valen was a story he owned. "Lord Cashin," Valen said quietly. Elara's breath hitched behind him. She didn't know the name, but she felt the weight of it. Cashin smiled. Still using that gentle voice, it fooled peasants. It even fooled you once. Marius's fingers stayed near his sword. "State your business and leave." Cashin offered a small bow, mocking, theatrical. "I came to return something that was stolen." His gaze dropped to the box in Valen's hand, and to collect something that was promised. Valen didn't flinch. "No one promised you anything." Cashin's smile widened, and for a moment he looked almost amused by Valen's denial. "Oh, but you did. Not with words, with weakness." Elara leaned forward, anger finding its courage. "He hasn't been weak, he's been kind." Cashin turned his head slowly, noticing her as if she were an interesting candle flame. "Ah, the brave village girl, the one who believes monsters can be taught manners." Valen's voice cooled. "Don't speak to her." Cashin's eyebrows lifted, delighted. "There it is. That's the old Valen I missed. Not the king of shadows, no. The man pretending he doesn't care while caring too much." Valen's hand tightened around the ribbon. His mind flashed to what Elara had said. Someone who wants you destroyed, and they're coming. "Why are you here, Cashin?" Valen asked. "And why now?" Cashin tapped the side of his coat as if checking for a pocket watch. "Because peace has made you soft, my king. You've spent decades building rules, holding back, feeding only when you must, protecting a village that still whispers your name like a curse." He leaned closer to the gate bars, voice lowering. "And soft kings are easy to replace." Marius barked, "Enough." Cashin ignored him and addressed Valen with almost affectionate disappointment. "You could have ruled through fear. Instead, you chose restraint. You chose to be good." He said the word good like it tasted bitter. Valen's eyes narrowed, and his voice came out with controlled clarity. "If you've come to provoke me, you're too late. I've lived with provocation for centuries." Cashin chuckled. "No, Valen, I came with a reminder." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small object that caught the torchlight, a broken piece of silver chain with a dull pendant attached. It looked ordinary to anyone else, but Valen's face changed, just slightly, like the stone mask cracked. Elara noticed immediately. "What is that?" Valen didn't answer. Marius did, reluctantly, as if the knowledge hurt to speak. "That belonged to the first queen of Noxmere." Cashin's eyes gleamed. "She begged you to stop punishing yourself, didn't she? She believed your soul could be saved, and then she died believing it." Elara's stomach dropped. You knew her." Cashin's smile turned sharper. "I was there when she begged. I was there when she fell." Valen's voice turned low, dangerous in its quiet. Do not use her memory. Cashin sighed as if Valen was being unreasonable. I'm not using it. I'm honoring it. I'm bringing you closure. He gestured toward the wooden box. Go on, Valen. Open the girl's little promise. Let's see what your precious kindness has purchased you. Elara's throat tightened. My mother wouldn't trap him. Cashin looked at her with theatrical pity. Sweet girl, mothers lie for love all the time. Valen looked down at the ribbon. He could hear Elara's heartbeat, frightened but sincere. He could hear Marius's, steady with suspicion. He could hear the guards, tense and ready. But beneath it all, he heard something else, faint, like a second echo of sound. A whisper of paper shifting inside the box. Not a weapon, not a mechanism, a letter. He raised the box to the torchlight and untied the ribbon, slow enough that everyone could see he was not hiding anything. The knot loosened, and the lid creaked open with the softest complaint. Inside was a folded letter and a smaller object wrapped in cloth. Elara leaned closer, eyes glossy. That's her handwriting, she whispered, as if saying it too loud might break it. Valen unfolded the letter carefully. The paper looked old but treasured, the ink faded in places where tears might have once fallen. He read silently at first, then his lips parted as if the words had reached somewhere deeper than his eyes. Marius watched him confused. My king, what does it say? Valen's voice came out hoarse, almost unfamiliar. It says, he swallowed, and for a second the immortal king looked like a man who had forgotten how to breathe. It says she forgave me. Elara's eyes widened. My mother, she forgave you. Valen nodded once, as if the movement cost him. She wrote that I spared her when no one would have blamed me for doing otherwise. She wrote that mercy is not weakness. His gaze stayed on the page, but his mind was clearly somewhere far away. She wrote that she saw my pain and she didn't hate me for it. Cashin clapped slowly, as if watching a play. Touching. Valen ignored him and continued, voice quieter. She wrote that I saved her life, and then I saved her dignity by never asking for anything in return. His eyes flicked to Elara. She wanted you to know, Elara, that you were born into a world that can be cruel, but you were not born to become cruel. Elara's lips trembled. She always said that, even when we had nothing. Valen's fingers reached for the cloth-wrapped object beneath the letter. He hesitated, sensing that the real truth was not in the ink, but in what his hand was about to uncover. Cashin's tone changed, still polite but edged with hunger. Open it. Valen unwrapped the cloth. A small ring lay in his palm. Plain, iron-dark, engraved with a tiny symbol, two intersecting lines like a crossroads. It looked like something a poor family might pass down, except it held a strange, quiet weight, like it belonged to more than one lifetime. Marius's face drained of color. That mark, no, that can't be. Valen's eyes locked onto the symbol, and a memory slammed into him so hard it nearly bent his posture. A different night, a different door, a human hand sliding that ring onto someone's finger, a vow spoken with trembling courage. Elara stared at it, confused. What is it? Valen's voice barely worked. It's a covenant ring. Cashin's smile returned, satisfied. Yes, it is. Marius stepped between Valen and Cashin, forcing his voice to stay controlled. Those rings were destroyed. Cashin's gaze flicked to Marius with bored contempt. Most were, but not this one. He turned back to Valen, eyes bright with the thrill of leverage. Your first vows, Valen, before the crown, before the darkness, before you decided you were unworthy of love. Valen's grip tightened until the ring pressed into his skin. He looked at Elara, and for the first time his composure wavered openly. Where did your mother get this? Elara shook her head, panicked. I don't know. She kept it hidden. She said it wasn't mine to wear until the right moment. Cashin leaned closer to the bars, voice like a knife wrapped in velvet. Your mother was not simply a peasant. She was a keeper, one of the last who knew how to bind a king to his own promise. Valen's eyes narrowed. Bind. Cashin nodded, almost kindly. A covenant ring doesn't chain the body, Valen. It chains the choice. It forces the wearer to become the thing they swore to be. Marius whispered, horrified. A vow binding. Elara's hands flew to her mouth. No, that's not what she wanted. Valen looked down at the ring again, fighting the sudden tremor in his hand. The idea of being forced to be good should have felt like a gift to someone who hated his own darkness. But it didn't. Because Valen didn't want goodness that was commanded. He wanted goodness that was chosen, again and again, especially when it was hard. He lifted his gaze to Cashin. So this is your plan, to make me wear it, to control me. Cashin's smile thinned. Control is such an ugly word. I prefer correct. Put it on, my king. Show your village what a perfectly obedient savior looks like. Then hand me your throne, because a king without freedom isn't a king at all. Valen's breathing slowed. He turned slightly to Elara, his voice gentle again, as if he was trying to keep her from blaming herself. You didn't know. Tears slipped down Elara's cheeks, furious and helpless. I thought it was hope. I thought it was proof you weren't what they say. Valen's eyes softened, and the pain in them was almost unbearable. It is proof, he said, just not the way Cashin wants. Then, from the fog behind Cashin, more silhouettes appeared, quiet figures with covered faces and lanterns dimmed low. They didn't rush. They surrounded the gate like a tightening circle, blocking the road back to the village. Elara's voice cracked. They followed me. Cashin didn't even look back. He knew his people were there. He de-choreographed this moment. Valen's hand hovered over the iron bars, ring in his palm, letter pressed against his chest by the wind. He could fight. He could flee. He could surrender. And he realized Cashin's trap was not the ring. It was Elara. If Valen refused, Cashin would punish the girl and the village and call it justice. If Valen accepted, he would lose himself, and Cashin would win without ever lifting a blade. Valen closed his eyes for a brief second, a quiet prayer to a faith he no longer trusted. When he opened them, his expression was steady, but wet at the edges. He placed the letter back into the box with careful respect, as if it were sacred. Then he looked at Elara and spoke softly enough that only she could hear. Whatever happens next, he said, remember this, kindness is not a chain, it is a choice. Elara shook her head, sobbing. Then choose yourself, please. Valen turned back to the gate, to Cashin, to the circling lanterns in the fog. And he lifted the covenant ring toward his finger, slowly, as if time itself was resisting. Cashin's eyes glittered with victory. Marius whispered, My king, don't. Valen paused with the ring hovering a breath away from his skin. Because suddenly, from inside the wooden box, something shifted again, something that hadn't been there before. A second fold of paper, hidden beneath the cloth lining, slid loose with the movement. Valen froze, sensing it like a heartbeat. He reached into the box and pulled out the secret note. Elara leaned in, startled. That wasn't on top. Valen unfolded it, and his eyes moved across the words. His face changed. Not into fear. Into determination. He looked up at Cashin, voice steady as stone and warm as fire. You misread her. Cashin's smile faltered for the first time. What? Valen held the note higher, letting the torchlight catch the ink. She didn't give me a chain. He slipped the ring back into his palm and closed his fingers around it like a promise he refused to surrender. She gave me a key. Cashin's expression tightened, and the lanterns in the fog seemed to inch closer. Valen stepped forward toward the gate, eyes fixed on the enemy who thought he owned the ending. And Elara realized, with a sudden chill and a sudden hope that the real story was only beginning. Part 2 ends with Valen lifting his gaze and saying, quietly but clearly, the vow kept by choice. Cashin entered first, savoring the moment, his followers spreading out in a careful half-circle. They carried no obvious weapons, only confidence and sealed scrolls, paper and authority, the kind of tools that ruin lives without leaving bruises. Brave, Cashin said, voice echoing softly off the castle walls. Or foolish, I can never decide which you prefer. Valen held the covenant ring in a closed fist, the iron-dark metal pressed into his palm, grounding him. Elara stood near the gate's inner pillar, trembling but upright, her hands clenched so tight her knuckles were pale. I read the hidden note, Valen said, eyes steady. The one her mother tucked beneath the lining. Cashin tilted his head, and Valen's voice softened, and for a moment he wasn't speaking as a king, but as a man who had been offered mercy when he didn't deserve it. It was written for me, but it was also written for Elara. It says, a vow that is forced becomes a cage. A vow that is chosen becomes a light. Elara's breath caught. Those words sounded like her mother, gentle, stubborn, brave in the quiet way. Cashin's smile strained. Pretty phrases don't change the rules of magic. Valen nodded once, acknowledging the truth without surrendering to it. No, but they change the rules of me. Marius moved to Valen's side, voice low. My king, what is the key? Valen opened the wooden box and lifted the letter again, tapping a spot near the bottom. There, in faded ink, was a simple instruction that looked almost like an afterthought. Wear it only if you mean it, Valen read aloud, and speak your vow where even your enemy can hear. Cashin's eyes narrowed. You think a public vow will save you? If you put that ring on, it will bind you. I will still take your throne the moment you're weakened by it. Valen's gaze didn't waver. Maybe, but the vow won't bind me to you. It will bind me to what I choose. Cashin laughed lightly. You always did love pretending you have control. Valen turned slightly, just enough to look back at Elara. In the torchlight, her fear was obvious, but so was something else, hope battling to stay alive. You came here believing there was good in me, he told her. Not because you were naive, but because you were courageous. The world teaches people to mock kindness until they need it. Elara's voice shook. I didn't come to start a war. Valen's expression warmed with a kind of sorrowful affection. Then don't. We won't give Cashin what he wants. Cashin's followers shifted, unsettled. They had expected snarling and chaos. Instead, they were getting calm, and calm makes manipulators nervous. Cashin's tone sharpened. Enough theater. Put on the ring, Valen, and submit. Or I tell the valley what you truly are. I've brought witnesses, documents, testimony. By dawn, they'll march here with fire in their hands and fear in their mouths. No one moved. Even the wind seemed to hold still. Valen looked at Cashin with something like pity. You think people only follow fear, he said quietly. That says more about you than it does about them. Cashin's jaw ticked. Do it. Valen opened his fist. The ring lay on his palm like a challenge and a prayer. He slid it onto his finger. The air didn't crack. No thunder. No violent light. Just a deep hush, as if the castle itself leaned closer to listen. Valen lifted his hand and spoke clearly, letting every guard, every follower, and every corner of the courtyard hear him. I, Valen of Noxmere, he said, voice steady, vow to protect human life, to rule without cruelty, and to never feed on fear. I vow to serve, not to own. I vow to be strong enough to be gentle. Cashin's smile returned, triumphant. How touching, now. Valen raised a finger, not as a threat, but as a boundary. And I add one more line. Marius's eyes widened. My king. Valen continued, louder, deliberate. I vow to break the power of any who would use vows to enslave others. starting tonight. For the first time, Cashin looked uncertain. You can't. The ring warmed, not burning, not hurting, warming, like the heat of a hand held during grief. It wasn't forcing Valen into obedience. It was answering the honesty in his words. Cashin stepped back half a pace. That ring binds the wearer. It doesn't bind the world. Valen nodded. Correct, it binds my choices, and I am choosing courage. He walked forward, closing the distance without rushing, his presence calm but immense. Cashin's followers instinctively retreated, not because they were attacked, but because they were suddenly ashamed. That kind of shame can feel like a shove. Cashin recovered his composure and snapped his fingers. Show him. Two of Cashin's people brought forward a sealed scroll with a red stamp. Decree of the Valley Council, Cashin announced. An accusation of predation, a demand for surrender, a call for the villagers to rise. He held it up like a weapon made of paper. Valen didn't tear it. He didn't mock it. He didn't deny the fear behind it. He did something Cashin never expected. He bowed his head. I understand why they fear me, Valen said. I've worn darkness for so long that it started to look like my skin. If I were them, I would fear me too. Cashin blinked, thrown off by the humility. Then surrender. Valen lifted his gaze. No, I will answer. He turned toward the guards along the wall. Bring the village bell. Marius stared. The bell hasn't rung in years. Ring it, Valen said. Not as an alarm, as an invitation. Minutes later, the old bell, hanging in the courtyard arch, began to sound. Low and steady, rolling across the fog into the valley like a heartbeat calling another heartbeat home. Elara's hands flew to her chest. They'll come afraid. Valen looked at her. Then we give them something else to carry. Cashin's voice tightened. You think a bell will fix centuries of fear? By dawn, they'll be here with torches. Valen nodded slightly. Then let dawn find us honest. While they waited, something unexpected happened. One of Cashin's followers, a young man with a lantern, lowered his hood. His eyes were not cruel, just tired. He swallowed hard and spoke into the silence. Lord Cashin told us the king murdered travelers. He said the girl was bait, and the castle was a trap. Elara recoiled, wounded. Valen didn't lash out. He simply said, I'm sorry you were lied to. The young man's voice cracked. Is it true? Are we in danger? Valen held his palms open, showing he carried no weapon, only the ring. You are in danger of becoming the kind of person who hurts others because someone gave you a reason that sounded righteous. That landed hard. Two more followers shifted uncomfortably. One looked at Elara, then away, ashamed. Cashin's expression hardened. Do not listen to him. Valen spoke to them anyway, voice even, human in its sincerity. If you want to leave, you may leave. No one will chase you. No one will punish you for changing your mind. Cashin snapped. Anyone who leaves is a traitor. Valen answered softly. Anyone who leaves is free. A beat of silence passed. Then the young man took a step back from Cashin. Another follower followed. Not a dramatic rebellion, not a loud fight, just people quietly refusing to be tools. Cashin's control slipped like sand through fingers. His charm sharpened into fury. You think you've won, Cashin hissed. You've just announced your weakness to the valley. Valen's eyes remained steady. No, I announced my responsibility. Hoofbeats sounded from beyond the gate. Lanterns bobbed in the fog. Villagers arrived with farm tools and shaking hands, not an army but a frightened crowd. At their front was an older woman with a shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, eyes red from sleepless nights. When she saw Elara, she gasped, Elara! Elara ran to her and held her, and the woman's arms locked around her like she'd been holding her breath for hours. Then the woman looked up at Valen, fear and anger wrestling on her face. What have you done to our children? Why does darkness follow your castle? Valen stepped closer, but not too close, leaving space like a promise. I haven't harmed your children, he said, but I haven't done enough to earn your peace either. Murmurs rippled. Cashin lifted the decree like a banner. Hear the truth, he admits it, he is the monster. Valen turned to the villagers and did not defend himself with pride. He defended them with truth. I have lived too long, he said. Long enough to learn that power is easiest when it doesn't care. I care. That is why I've been lonely, and that is why I have hidden. He glanced at Elara and then back at the crowd. This young woman came to my gate with her mother's letter. Her mother was once saved by mercy. She believed mercy could grow. I want to prove she was right. A man in the crowd shouted, voice shaking. Prove it how? Valen lifted his ringed hand so the torchlight caught it. By binding myself to a vow that protects you. Cashin laughed sharply. A staged performance, words are smoke. Valen looked at Cashin, then back to the crowd. He's right about one thing, words alone are not enough. He turned and called to Marius. Bring the stored blood wine from the lower vault. The villagers stiffened at the word blood. Elara's mother figure, her aunt, perhaps, held Elara tighter. Marius hesitated, then obeyed. 2 guards carried out a sealed cask used for emergencies, something Valen had kept to avoid harming anyone. Valen placed his hand on it. I kept this so I wouldn't have to take from the living. Tonight, I will do more than promise. Tonight, I will give up what I've been relying on. Marius's voice went tight. Your Majesty, without it, you'll weaken. Valen nodded. Yes. Cashin's eyes lit up, hungry. Finally, sense. Valen's gaze flicked to him, calm as falling snow. Not for you, for them. Valen took the spigot and in front of everyone poured the dark liquid onto the stones. It ran in thin streams between the cracks, disappearing into the thirsty ground. No gore, no spectacle, just surrender, costly and real. A hush fell so deep it felt like prayer. One villager whispered, almost against their will, he gave it up. Valen's shoulders remained straight, but Elara saw the subtle change. The effort it cost him to stay steady, the way his breath drew slower, as if he'd just walked into winter without a coat. Cashin's smile returned, certain now. Weak, he breathed. Now you'll do what I say. Valen turned to Cashin, voice quiet. No. Cashin's tone turned sharp, venomous. Then I will take the valley with fear. I will tell them you're starving, unstable. I will. Valen interrupted him, still gentle. You will do what you've always done. You will try to buy loyalty with terror. Cashin stepped forward, eyes flashing. And it will work. Elara suddenly moved, stepping between Cashin and Valen for half a second, courage rising like a flame that surprised even her. Stop. Cashin looked down at her, annoyed. Little girl. Elara's voice steadied. My mother didn't send me here to chain him. She sent me here to test the truth, and he passed. The crowd watched her. Someone who had arrived trembling now stood taller. Valen placed a gentle hand near Elara's shoulder, not gripping, not controlling, just present. Elara, he said softly, thank you, but you don't have to be brave for me. She glanced back, tears shining. Maybe not, but I have to be brave for myself. That simple line broke something open in the villagers. Fear is loud, but courage is contagious when it's real. The older woman who'd hugged Elara stepped forward, voice wavering. If he wanted to harm us, he wouldn't be pouring away the very thing that keeps him strong. A man lowered the tool in his hand. Another extinguished his lantern halfway, embarrassed by how ready he'd been to hate. Cashin's face tightened as his audience slipped away. You're all fools, he snapped at the villagers. He's manipulating you. Valen's voice stayed calm. Cashin, you came here to make me choose between my freedom and their safety. Cashin's eyes narrowed. And Valen lifted his ringed hand. I chose both. He turned to the villagers. I will not rule you. I will not demand your trust overnight, but I will open the castle's stores to the valley during winter. I will patrol the forest paths so your children can travel safely. And if you wish, you may place a human representative at my council table, not as a hostage, as a voice. Marius looked shocked. A human at council. Valen nodded, humility clear. If I'm serious about protecting them, I must be serious about listening. Elara's breath caught. She expected a dramatic victory, not this quiet rebuilding. Cashin realized he was losing, and his voice rose. You can't do this. You can't just become a saint because a girl showed up with a letter. Valen's eyes were tired but unwavering. I'm not a saint. I'm someone who got a second chance and decided not to waste it. Cashin's followers, the ones who remained, looked at Cashin like strangers now. His power had depended on certainty. Valen had offered something harder, responsibility. Cashin's mouth curled. Then I'll take the only thing you still care about. His gaze flicked to Elara. The villagers tensed. Marius stepped forward. Valen didn't move fast. He didn't need to. His voice dropped into a tone that wasn't violent, just absolute. No, Valen said. One word, heavy as a locked door. Cashin froze, not because he was magically restrained, but because the courtyard had changed. The villagers were no longer standing behind fear. They were standing behind each other. Elara stepped closer to her people, and her aunt held her hand openly now, not hiding her. Valen looked at Cashin with something like grief. You could have left tonight free, he said, but you would rather be powerful than be human. Cashin spat back, I am more than human. Valen replied, voice quiet, so am I, that's why I know we don't get to use it as an excuse. Cashin glanced around, realizing there would be no cheering crowd for him, no panic to ride like a horse. His followers were gone or ashamed. The villagers were watching him the way people watch a storm that's finally moving away. Cashin backed toward the gate, pride holding his chin high even as defeat pulled at his heels. This isn't over, he said. Valen nodded once. No, he agreed, but it will be different from now on. Cashin vanished into the fog, retreating with the scraps of his control. For a long moment, no one spoke. The bell's last echo faded into the trees. Valen's knees didn't buckle, but Elara saw the subtle sway, how much it cost him to pour away his strength. Marius stepped close, ready to steady him without making it a spectacle. The older woman approached carefully, eyes still wary but softer. Why would you do that? She asked, voice raw. Why give up your safety for people who don't even trust you? Valen's answer was simple, and it hit harder than any speech. Because someone once showed me mercy, he said, and I'm trying to become worthy of it. Elara stepped forward, holding the wooden box to her chest like it was a living thing. My mother used to say, love is not what you feel in the light, it's what you choose in the dark. Valen looked at her, and for the first time his smile was real, small, sad, and warm. Your mother was wise. Marius cleared his throat, eyes suspiciously bright. We still have a problem, my king. Cashin will spread lies. The Valley Council may return. Valen nodded. They might. Elara lifted her chin. Then we tell the truth louder. A few villagers murmured agreement, hesitant but genuine. One man, who had arrived gripping a tool like a weapon, now held it like it was just a tool again. Valen turned to Elara. You are safe here tonight, he said. And tomorrow, if you choose, you can return home with an escort. Or, he hesitated, humility winning over pride. Or you can stay and help me build something new, if that is what you want. Elara stared at him, torn between fear of the unknown and the strange pull of purpose. You'd let a human stay in your castle. Valen's eyes met hers, not as a prisoner, as a partner. It should have felt like a fairy tale. Instead, it felt like work, real work, the kind that changes people slowly. Elara nodded, tears slipping free. Then I'll stay, not because I'm not afraid, but because I'm tired of fear deciding everything. Valen exhaled, almost a laugh, almost a sob. Me too. That night, the castle doors remained open for the villagers who needed warmth. Soup was served from old kitchens that hadn't heard laughter in years. Someone, no one ever admitted who, made a joke about how the terrifying vampire king had the posture of a disappointed librarian, and even Marius let out an unwilling chuckle. And Valen, sitting at the far end of the hall with no crown on his head, listened to human voices filling his home without taking anything from them. Not their blood, not their freedom, not their dignity. Only their presence. Later, when the candles burned low, Elara found Valen alone in the corridor, staring at the ring on his finger as if it were a question he would spend a lifetime answering. "Does it hurt?" she asked softly. Valen glanced up. "The ring." Elara nodded. Valen considered it, then shook his head. "No, what hurts is realizing how long I believed I wasn't allowed to be good, unless it was paid for in suffering." Elara stepped closer. "And now?" Valen's voice softened. "Now I know goodness can be chosen without hatred. Strength can be gentle, and love, real love, doesn't demand a throne." Elara looked at him, and the tension between them wasn't loud or rushed. It was quiet, respectful, growing in the space where trust is earned. "My mother hoped you'd stop living like a punishment," she whispered. Valen's eyes shone, and he blinked slowly as if he was learning how to be seen. "Then I will try," he said. "Every night, even when it's difficult." Outside, dawn began to thin the fog, turning it from a threat into mist. And in that pale new light, the vampire king of Noxmere didn't look like a monster from a story. He looked like someone rebuilding himself, one humble choice at a time. The story ends with Valen opening the castle's highest window and letting morning air flood in, then speaking a final vow, not to the ring, but to the world below. "Let my shadow be a shelter, not a terror. If I must be remembered, let it be for what I protected, especially when I had every reason not to."